Since the dawn of humanity, the quest for truth has always been a flame burning within the human spirit. However, at some point along the timeline, this flame began to be smothered by invisible layers of doubt, fear, and control. We grew up hearing incomplete stories, learning half-truths, and accepting explanations that deep down failed to address the quiet unrest nestled in our hearts. This unrest is not new. It pulses within each of us who, despite being surrounded by information, feels that something essential has been stripped from the collective consciousness. It's as if we are trying to piece together a cosmic puzzle with fragments scattered across millennia of silence and manipulation. The truth hasn't vanished, it has been shattered. Fragmented into compartments, divided into sectors, and hidden behind codes and symbols that many have yet to learn to decipher. Knowledge, in its purest form, was a singular entity. It made no distinctions between science, philosophy, spirituality, or art. It was a living body of wisdom that connected people to the earth, the heavens, and to themselves. But then something happened, something powerful enough to break that unity and sow the seeds of separation. From that moment on, knowledge ceased to be a path of expansion and became a battleground over what could and could not be known. The result was devastating. Humanity, once connected to its surroundings, began to see itself as an isolated entity, detached from its original purpose. The mind was exalted while the spirit was forgotten. The body became a machine, and the soul, mere superstition. We started to perceive reality as a logical sequence of material events, dismissing the invisible dimensions that have always been part of the human experience. This fragmentation didn't just occur in books and burned libraries, it happened within us. We were taught to distrust our intuition, to mock the mystical, and to accept the tangible as the only form of truth. In doing so, we lost the map that guided us to the center of our very being. But who benefits when a people lose their connection to their essential knowledge? Why have so many cultures been silenced? Why has so much ancient wisdom been dismissed as heresy, superstition, or primitivism? What lies behind this systematic effort to create separation? These questions not only provoke discomfort, they reveal that the fragmentation of knowledge was not an accident. In many cases, it was a deliberate choice, a silent architecture designed to keep humanity disconnected from its origins, from nature, and from the universe. This is where our journey begins, a path that doesn't seek easy answers but invites a deep excavation of the hidden roots of our programmed ignorance. For centuries, leaders and institutions have established systems to shape collective thought. Dogmas, school curricula, religious doctrines, and power structures have been designed to restrict access to the entirety of knowledge. Instead of fostering curiosity and interconnectedness, these systems have encouraged rigid specializations, with each field of study following isolated paths that often conflict with one another. Spirituality has been severed from science, which in turn has drifted away from philosophy, and ethics has also been distanced from these realms. As a result, the individual, at the center of this maze, finds themselves living in a world of fragments, including their own identity. This separation, however, didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, orchestrated with patience and persistence. From the earliest empires, through institutional religions, and into modern governments, knowledge has been controlled, filtered, and adapted. The history we learn in schools is a carefully edited version of events. The great thinkers of the past, when they weren't silenced, had their ideas distorted. What remains are fragments, scattered pieces of a once complete whole. The confusion many feel when trying to understand their own existence is the most evident symptom of this divide. The cruelest part of this process is that it masquerades as progress. We've created the illusion that the more we advance technologically, the more we evolve as a civilization. But technology without wisdom is like a double-edged sword with no handle. Our era is marked by a brutal paradox. We have instant access to a wealth of information, yet we have never been further from the truth. We are bombarded with data, opinions, and statistics, and yet what truly matters remains out of reach. This is no coincidence. It reflects a carefully crafted structure designed to replace knowledge with noise. And the more noise there is, the less clarity we have. At the same time, this very structure creates a profound sense of emptiness. an emptiness that can't be filled with diplomas, titles, or material achievements. It's an existential void, an inexplicable longing for something we've never been able to name, yet we miss it as if it were a part of our very being. This yearning is the first sign of awakening. It marks the starting point for those who begin to realize that there's something beyond the veil. The reality we've been told is merely a superficial layer of something much more vast, ancient, and interconnected. And it's in the space between what we're told and what we feel that the possibility of reconnection begins to emerge. If we take a closer look, we'll see that this disconnect isn't just a modern phenomenon. It's a recurring pattern throughout history. Ancient peoples who lived in harmony with the cosmos were conquered, erased, or assimilated by cultures that brought with them a linear, hierarchical, and fragmented view of existence. Each territorial conquest also represented a symbolic victory, the imposition of a new belief system, language, and worldview. Knowledge, once a living entity, became a commodity, and those who owned this commodity held the power. At its core, this is the root of all fragmentation: control. Controlling what people know means controlling how they live, think, and even feel. When a community understands its history, origins, and symbols, it becomes difficult to manipulate. However, when that knowledge is stripped away, distorted, or ridiculed, it creates a vacuum for external ideologies to fill the void left by internal understanding. This results in generations that are disconnected from themselves, alienated from their true nature, and trapped in a system that promises answers while keeping the real questions hidden. This cycle continues until someone chooses to break free from it. Breaking up with him takes courage. It requires a willingness to question, explore, deconstruct, and above all, to remember. Remember a time when knowledge was shared in a vibrant, organic way, connected to the heart and to our observations of the world. Remember that there were, and still are, paths of wisdom that haven't been filtered through official institutions. Remember that we are more than just data consumers. We are beings in search of meaning, and that meaning isn't found in fragments, but in the invisible web that connects everything. What is fragmented on the outside is also fragmented within us. Healing begins with the awareness of this. Every hidden or distorted piece of truth throughout history still resonates in the collective unconscious, waiting to be reclaimed. This reclamation won't come from an official system or an external authority. It will arise from within, from each individual who, feeling the discomfort of emptiness, chooses to embark on the journey back to wholeness. That's why this theme is so vital. It speaks not only about the past, but also about the present of anyone who feels out of place, lost, yet still driven by an inner voice that whispers of something greater. And that voice doesn't lie, it simply waits to be heard. The moment we begin to hear that voice, something shifts. The world transforms from a tangled web of random facts into a tapestry of connections, symbols, and patterns. We start to see beyond the surface. We recognize the presence of unity amid diversity. We come to sense that reality isn't a straight line, but a spiral that returns, expands, and evolves. At this point, the quest for truth shifts from an external search to an internal journey of reconnecting with what was never truly lost, only hidden, and so the veil begins to lift, revealing not just what was concealed, but who we have always been behind the fractured narratives. At some point along the invisible line that traces the history of humanity, there was a time when knowledge was not merely stored, but lived. Before words were confined to paper and thoughts distilled into formulas, there were civilizations that understood knowledge as a living, breathing entity, intertwined with the rhythms of nature, the cycles of the cosmos, and human consciousness. This knowledge was not the exclusive domain of an intellectual or spiritual elite. It was shared, revered, and safeguarded by those who recognize that knowledge does not belong to individuals, but to the universal flow of existence. These guardians existed, yet their names have faded from official chronicles. They were the silent architects of living libraries, centers of wisdom that now survive only as myths or forgotten ruins. The Library of Alexandria stands as perhaps the most powerful symbol of this erasure. Established as the greatest center of knowledge in the ancient world, It housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts from every corner of the known earth. It was more than just a collection of texts. It was a vibrant heart of multidimensional wisdom, philosophy, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, spirituality, alchemy, linguistics, poetry, all coexisted without barriers, with no walls separating the disciplines. And then, in a moment of smoke and silence, it was destroyed. Accounts of its demise vary. Some speak of accidental fires, while others cite political and religious orders. But the fact remains, we lost an entire universe of knowledge that can never be fully reclaimed. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect is not the loss itself, but the absence of a collective mourning for it. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria was not an isolated incident. It represents a recurring theme throughout human history: the deliberate erasure of profound knowledge. Entire civilizations that held millennia-old wisdom were decimated, their books burned and their temples destroyed. The Mayan codices, rich in astronomical and spiritual insights, were largely obliterated by Spanish conquerors who viewed them as a threat to European spiritual dominance. The mystery schools of Egypt, Sumer, Persia, and ancient India were silenced or reduced to mere fragments. Oral traditions, a source of ancestral wisdom, were disrupted by wars, cultural domination, and the imposition of new beliefs. With each act of destruction, a piece of the human spirit faded away, and few noticed. Who were these guardians really? They didn't wear lab coats or hold academic titles, nor did they sit on thrones or preach from pulpits. They were monks, elders, priestesses, shamans, philosophers, and both spiritual and material scientists. Men and women who understood that true knowledge is sacred, not something to be hoarded but shared. Many of them lived in silent orders, hidden among civilizations, safeguarding manuscripts and traditions, sometimes at the cost of their own lives. Their purpose wasn't to dominate the world with knowledge, but to protect the truth until humanity was ready to hear it again. Many faced persecution, while others faded into obscurity. Yet all of them left traces, subtle clues, and hidden messages that still resonate today for those with attentive ears and eyes that see beyond the surface. The loss of these centers of knowledge was not just physical, it led to a collective spiritual amnesia. Without their anchor points, humanity began to construct systems rooted in separation and competition. Knowledge became viewed as intellectual capital, something to be measured, compared, and monetized. Education shifted from being a means of expanding consciousness to merely training for rote memorization. In this process, the big questions, who are we? Where do we come from? What is the purpose of existence? Were replaced by utilitarian, mechanized inquiries focused solely on the tangible world. The sacred was exiled from learning, and in doing so, we also exiled fundamental parts of our own nature. Even so, the memory lingers. Across all cultures, even those that are geographically distant, we find traces of a shared wisdom. Archetypes that recur, similar myths, parallel spiritual practices, celestial maps pointing to the same constellations. This isn't mere coincidence. It's the echo of an ancient network of knowledge that was once global, long before we understood what globalization meant. A network that didn't rely on the internet, but on direct connections between awakened beings. These ties still exist, hidden beneath legends, traditions, and seemingly unrelated symbols. But those who learn to read the invisible begin to piece together this lost puzzle. Human language itself holds clues to what was once whole. Words like universe, meaning that which moves in one direction, and educate, derived from educere, meaning to draw out from within, reveal a past where knowledge was seen as something internal rather than external. Today, however, we learn to accumulate rather than to uncover. This shift in intention is also part of the fragmentation project. Knowledge has been stripped of its essence, becoming a soulless technique, and any soulless technique turns into a tool for control. Wisdom, which once served as a bridge between worlds, has become a wall, and few have dared to climb over it. But there have always been exceptions, quiet lineages that even when persecuted, kept the flame alive. Indigenous peoples, mystical Sufis, yogis from India, Taoist masters, Kabbalists, Rosicrucians, Gnostics, Essenes, all of these, in one way or another, preserved fragments of ancient wisdom. They were the ones who kept the seeds of what may one day bloom again. These guardians sought neither recognition nor power. Their role was to prepare the ground and nurture the roots. Today, those roots are available to anyone who wishes to return to the source. However, it requires humility, reverence, and the courage to unlearn everything that has been taught as absolute. Even today, there are hidden libraries, secret archives and documents stored in places inaccessible to the public. Some claim that there are secret texts safeguarded in the Vatican, while others believe they're hidden in caves in Tibet or undisclosed chambers in Egypt. This isn't just conspiracy theory. It's evidence of the care taken to keep certain information away from the public eye. And the inevitable question arises: why? What could be in these texts that would so profoundly shake our current foundations? Why the fear of the truth? Perhaps it's because accessing this knowledge could irrevocably change everything: how we see ourselves, the universe, life, and death. And for many, that remains a threat. Perhaps the greatest legacy of these lost libraries lies not in what they contained, but in what they represent. A time when knowledge was revered as sacred, when learning was not a possession, but a shared experience, when the act of acquiring knowledge was a tribute to life itself. By recalling this era, even if only in our imagination, we reignite the flame that we were taught to extinguish. And once that flame is rekindled, it can never be snuffed out. For it is not merely a memory, it is a longing for wholeness, for meaning, for reconnection with something greater than ourselves, yet something that has always resided within us. Just like the sacred fire that was never meant to extinguish in ancient temples, this desire guides us back to our quest. A quest that isn't confined to the past, but must also embrace the present. Today, we need to rebuild our own internal libraries. We must hold within ourselves the wisdom that reconnects us with our essence. It's time to stop seeking answers solely in books and start listening for them in silence, in contemplation, and in the deep listening to the world and to ourselves. Because, in the end, the most powerful libraries aren't made of stone or parchment, but of souls that remember. There was a time when all knowledge was a unified whole. When the ancient Egyptians built their temples aligned with the stars, they weren't just practicing astronomy. They were honoring the principle that the sky and the earth reflect one another, that knowledge is inseparable from reverence. When Greek philosophers debated the nature of reality, they engaged in a dialogue with the unseen, considering both logic and the soul. And when Eastern masters spoke of vital energy, chakras, meridians, or prana, they weren't merely performing rituals. They were mapping the depths of human consciousness. In that forgotten era, science, philosophy, and spirituality were not separate paths. They were different facets of the same mountain. Climbing one meant reaching them all. But this mountain has been fractured. The unity of knowledge began to crumble slowly, in a subtle, gradual, and persistent process. It wasn't an immediate break. Rather, it was a progressive distancing that intensified with each generation. What was once an organic, interconnected web has become divided into isolated sectors, each protected by conceptual and methodological walls. Philosophy came to be seen as mere speculation. Spirituality was reduced to blind belief. Meanwhile, science claimed the throne of absolute truth, declaring itself the only legitimate form of knowledge. This separation not only impoverished our understanding of reality, but also reduced humanity to an analytical machine, disconnected from its own core. During the transition from the ancient world to the modern era, historical forces drove this fragmentation. With the rise of institutionalized Christianity in the Roman Empire, many schools of thought that embraced knowledge were either shut down or absorbed into religious dogma. The Academy of Plato, Aristotle's Lyceum, and the Eleusinian Mysteries, these were all spaces where science and spirituality coexisted, but they were replaced by closed theological systems. The pursuit of knowledge gave way to obedience. Philosophical inquiry was overshadowed by catechism. The spiritual realm became the exclusive domain of clergy, turning it into forbidden territory for the curious. This divide deepened even further during the European Middle Ages. Philosophy became a servant to theology. Science was viewed with suspicion, and any attempt to understand natural mechanisms without the filter of faith was considered heresy. Galileo Galilei was put on trial for asserting that the Earth revolved around the sun, not for challenging reality, but for challenging the monopoly on knowledge. Giordano Bruno was burned alive for speaking about the universe's infinity and the existence of multiple inhabited worlds. Hypatia of Alexandria was brutally murdered for upholding the tradition of integrated philosophy. These martyrs of holistic knowledge paid with their lives for refusing to accept the forced separation between knowing and being. With the Renaissance came a brief attempt to reunify the various parts of knowledge. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci sought to understand human anatomy with the same fervor they applied to studying the flight of birds or the principles of perspective. Alchemists such as Paracelsus aimed to merge medicine, spirituality, and cosmology into a practice that healed both body and soul. Philosophers like Giordano Bruno and Pico della Mirandola endeavored to reignite the spark of holistic knowledge, reminding us that humanity serves as the link between heaven and earth. However, this revival was soon overshadowed by the rise of the mechanistic paradigm, which would come to dominate the following centuries. The Enlightenment, while it brought significant advancements in critical thinking and the scientific method, also solidified a division. Reason came to be viewed as the sole valid tool for understanding reality. Anything that couldn't be measured, tested, or replicated was dismissed as superstition. Spirituality was excluded from public discourse and relegated to the private realm of faith. Philosophy became abstract, often disconnected from everyday life. Science evolved into a technical language, accessible only to a select few. Knowledge shifted from being an experience to becoming a specialization. In the process, the invisible thread that connected all things was lost. This new paradigm gave rise to modern academia, where each field of knowledge developed independently, often in contradiction to others. A biologist might spend their entire life studying cellular behavior without ever considering consciousness. A physicist can uncover universal laws without reflecting on the meaning of existence. A philosopher may delve into conceptual mazes without ever touching on the human heart. The academic world has turned knowledge into isolated territories, guarded by jargon, publications, and credentials. In doing so, it has pushed wisdom to the fringes of the system, relegating it to something outdated or unscientific. The result of this has been an unbalanced civilization. We've made rapid technological advancements, yet emotionally and spiritually, we remain lost in search of meaning. We've built satellites and interplanetary probes, but we struggle to listen to our inner silence. We've developed genetic cures, but we suffer from loneliness and anxiety. We can decode DNA, yet we fail to grasp the very purpose of our existence. This disconnect between technical knowledge and existential wisdom is a direct consequence of the separation between science, philosophy, and spirituality. Until we bring these dimensions back together, we'll continue to go in circles. What has been lost is not just the interconnection between fields of knowledge, but the very notion of unity. We have lost sight of the idea that everything is interconnected, that each phenomenon carries multiple layers of meaning. We've forgotten that scientific observation can be a spiritual act, that meditation can serve as a form of philosophical inquiry, and that love, empathy, and compassion are also valid forms of knowledge. By excluding these dimensions from our understanding, we become specialists in fragments of reality while remaining blind to the whole. This ignorance is dangerous, as it leads us down a path that distances us from our very humanity. Even within the realm of science, there are voices calling for reconnection. Quantum physicists questioning the nature of reality, neuroscientists exploring altered states of consciousness, biologists recognizing the intelligence of plants, and mathematicians uncovering universal patterns that resonate with ancient mystical traditions. Yet, these voices remain in the minority and are often silenced or dismissed by the mainstream. Nevertheless, they point toward a future where knowledge can once again be whole, a future where we won't have to choose between reason and intuition, logic and mysticism, science and the soul. The reunification of knowledge is the great challenge of our time. It calls for humility from scientists, courage from philosophers, and openness from spiritualists. It demands a new educational model that integrates body, mind, and spirit. We must let go of intellectual pride and recognize that mystery is not a flaw in the system, but an essential part of existence. We need to return to asking the big questions. We must have the audacity not just to learn, but to truly be. Above all, we should stop seeking truth in fragments and start experiencing it as a living, unifying presence that resides in everything that is. If the fragmentation of unity was a choice, whether conscious or not, that has shaped the last few centuries, its restoration can also be a choice. However, it won't emerge from systems that thrive on division. It will arise from individuals who choose to pursue the path of reintegration, those who are no longer satisfied with half-truths, who yearn for knowledge that heals, transforms, and reveals. This path requires letting go of certainties, a willingness to navigate between different worlds, and the courage to move forward without guarantees. Yet, it is the only path capable of restoring the true purpose of knowledge, to make us more human, more aware, and more whole. Throughout human history, behind declared wars and official narratives, invisible forces have shaped the course of knowledge. While kings, emperors, and governments took center stage in the visible history, other, less obvious orders were moving the pieces that determined what could or couldn't be known, taught, or shared. This hidden layer of reality has always been present, operating in the shadows and the light, nurturing secret knowledge while filtering what the common people were allowed to access. Over the centuries, these invisible orders, often cloaked in spiritual, religious, philosophical, or political power, have defined the boundaries of human thought. They decided which parts of the truth would be made public, and which would be buried under seals, oaths, and the burning of manuscripts. These forces cannot be reduced to a single organization or conspiracy. They are complex networks of interests, traditions, and control strategies. Some originated with noble intentions, aiming to preserve sacred knowledge from corruption and destruction. Others, recognizing the power to shape consciousness through knowledge, began to wield it as a tool of domination. Religious orders, secret societies, ecclesiastical councils, philosophical academies, and state agencies have all, at various times, acted as guardians, and also censors, of what could be thought, said, or studied. Knowledge ceased to be a universal gift and became the property of a select few, safeguarded in temples, sealed archives, coded languages, and initiatory traditions. For over 1,000 years, the Catholic Church held an almost absolute monopoly on the production and dissemination of knowledge in the West. Writings deemed dangerous were burned, and ancient texts were either rewritten or lost. Any idea that challenged the dominant theological narrative was labeled heresy. Lists of prohibited books were published regularly. Philosophical thought was reduced to doctrinal scholasticism. Knowledge about the body, nature, astronomy, and human consciousness was stifled under rigid dogmas. Although universities emerged from this framework, they were born under strict surveillance. Knowledge was meticulously monitored, edited, and shaped. Those who dared to cross the imposed boundaries often paid with their lives, exile, or excommunication. But it wasn't just the church. As colonial empires expanded, the knowledge of indigenous peoples was systematically erased. Languages became extinct. Texts were destroyed. Millennia-old spiritual practices were ridiculed, criminalized, and replaced. Colonization was not just geographical or economic. It was epistemological. A singular way of knowing was imposed, one that was Western, linear, rational, and exclusionary. Anything that didn't fit this mold was dismissed as superstition, ignorance, or primitivism. Peoples who lived in direct connection with the earth and the cycles of the cosmos came to be seen as savages. Their traditions were scorned, their healers were persecuted, their cosmologies were erased. Within the very structure of modern political power, a new layer of knowledge control has emerged: the nation-state and its educational institutions. Schools, universities, and textbooks began to teach an official version of history and science, narratives that served the interests of the status quo. Curricula were designed to produce obedient, productive citizens, shaped to uphold the existing system. Critical thinking, philosophical inquiry, and profound spiritual questioning were gradually excluded from the educational process. In their place, training for the workforce was instituted, fostering a reverence for technique and the mastery of information devoid of wisdom. Living knowledge was replaced by lifeless data. At the same time, discrete societies and initiatory orders have quietly preserved fragments of ancient knowledge. Groups like the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, and modern Essenes have maintained symbolic practices, hidden languages, and esoteric teachings that trace back to traditions long before established religions. However, access to this knowledge has always been, and still is, restricted. It requires oaths, levels of initiation, and loyalty to the internal structure. While they have played a role in keeping certain flames alive, these orders also engage in the game of exclusivity. The knowledge that liberates, paradoxically, remains locked behind gates. The key to awakening becomes a privilege for the few rather than a light for all. With the rise of modern science, it was believed that this barrier was beginning to break down. After all, the scientific method promised objectivity, transparency, and verification. However, it didn't take long for science itself to be co-opted by power structures. Today, major research is funded by economic interests. What gets researched, published, and disseminated, all of it goes through filters. Experiments that challenge the dominant paradigm are often ignored. Discoveries that point toward a broader, more integrative and spiritual reality are ridiculed or suppressed. Scientists who dare to break these barriers are frequently marginalized. Science has become yet another ivory tower, shielded by inaccessible language, bureaucracy, and corporate interests. In the realm of communication, the situation is no different. The media, dominated by economic conglomerates, dictates what can be said, what must be repeated, and what needs to be silenced. Knowledge is increasingly shaped by algorithms. What appears on our screens isn't necessarily the most truthful content, but rather what generates the most engagement, profit, and control. Social media, which could serve as bridges for the free exchange of ideas, have instead become closed bubbles, fueled by confirmation bias and superficial distractions. Those seeking the truth must navigate an ocean of noise, distraction, and misinformation before they can uncover anything that truly resonates with profound wisdom. The greatest irony of it all is that we live in the information age, yet we remain prisoners of fundamental ignorance. We know names, dates, formulas, and statistics, but we don't know how to live, how to die, how to love, or how to simply be. The knowledge that connects us to the essence of existence remains locked away. It's not due to a lack of books, but rather because of systems that teach us to seek externally what can only be found within. The wisdom that heals isn't found in grand institutions, but in the quiet traditions that endure on the fringes. The knowledge that awakens doesn't shout from the headlines. It whispers through symbols, practices, dreams, and forgotten intuitions. The true guardians of wisdom don't wear robes, live in palaces, or hold honorary titles. They are among us, quiet, aware, and attentive. They are masters disguised as ordinary people. You can find them in villages, monasteries, forgotten libraries, silent rooms, and humble hearts. They are the ones who keep the flame of holistic knowledge alive, even amidst the chaos of fragmentation. These guardians exist because they know that the moment of revelation is drawing near. More and more people are awakening to the illusion of fragmented knowledge and are seeking to rediscover the truth that has been buried beneath layers of deception. The question we should be asking now isn't just, who decides what I can know, but rather, why have I allowed others to make that decision for me? The answer calls for a return to the sovereignty of the spirit, the courage of free thought, and the reintegration of knowledge with being. It's time to break the seals, to challenge the imposed limits, to seek with our hearts what has been denied to our minds, and to finally understand that knowledge is not a product, not power, not a privilege. It is an inherent right of every awakened consciousness. Truth can no longer be owned. It must return to being a living presence, both within and outside of each of us. The story of humanity is largely a tale of knowledge control. Long before the age of technology and information, knowledge was already seen as a powerful weapon, capable of building or destroying civilizations. From the earliest times, possessing knowledge was linked to power over bodies, minds, and souls. While the masses lived under imposed narratives, a small group held the keys, the maps, the texts, and the symbols that unveiled the invisible structure of reality. Instead of being shared as sustenance for all, knowledge became concentrated, surrounded by symbolic and material barriers, and transformed into a rare currency, accessible only to those who complied with the rules of the game. This reversal of values marked the beginning of an era where knowledge ceased to be a common good and became a tool for maintaining power. For millennia, access to reading, writing, and education was reserved for specific castes. In many civilizations, mastery of written language was limited to priests, scribes, and political elites. In ancient Egyptian temples, for instance, hieroglyphs were not taught to the general populace. In Sumer, cuneiform writing was the exclusive domain of priestly schools. During feudal Japan, reading was a privilege of the aristocracy. In medieval Europe, much of the population lived and died without ever having access to a book. This enforced illiteracy was no accident. It was a strategy. Those who control symbols control the narrative, and those who control the narrative shape perceptions of reality. Without access to reading, the people were forced to accept ready-made interpretations, relying on intermediaries to understand the divine, history, and even their own circumstances. With the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg in the 15th century, there was an initial break in this dynamic. Books could be produced on a larger scale, and knowledge began to spread. However, the system of control quickly reorganized itself. The most significant works remained restricted. Books that challenged the established order were censored, confiscated, or banned. The Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation wielded the printed word as a tool for power struggles rather than as a means of individual liberation. Universities, emerging as centers of knowledge, demanded ideological, racial, religious, and economic conformity. Education has never been neutral. It has been shaped by interests seeking to create a specific type of human being: productive, obedient, and compliant. The content taught was carefully curated, with anything that didn't align with the system being excluded. In the modern world, the control of knowledge has become more sophisticated. Public education, while more accessible, still operates like a factory for conformity. From a young age, children are trained to memorize information, repeat formulas, and follow rules. Creativity, intuition, sensitivity, and critical thinking are often discouraged. Few learn to think for themselves. Most are taught to replicate what they've been given. The school curriculum almost entirely overlooks the hidden history of humanity: integrative spiritual traditions, ancestral medicines, symbolic wisdom, consciousness studies, and the cosmology of indigenous peoples. Instead, it promotes a reductionist, fragmented, and superficial view of reality, focused on competition, productivity, and specialization. Knowledge is shaped to serve the economic machine, not to liberate the individual. The corporate world quickly recognized that knowledge is a form of capital. Companies invest billions in data, research, and technological development, yet they keep their findings hidden behind patents, contracts, and confidentiality clauses. Science, which should be an open pursuit of truth, has become hostage to commercial interests. Studies that support certain industries are promoted, while research that highlights risks or suggests alternatives is buried. Knowledge has turned into a commodity. What was once a symbol of enlightenment is now traded as a product. Truth has acquired market value, and knowledge that can't be monetized is dismissed as irrelevant. In politics, knowledge has also been manipulated to uphold structures of domination. Strategies of misinformation, media control, and mass manipulation have always been present in authoritarian regimes. However, in the digital age, these methods have become even more effective. Governments and corporations invest in carefully crafted narratives, influence algorithms, and shape public debates. Public opinion is guided by filtered data. The illusion of choice conceals the reality that the information available has already been selectively curated. The masses are fed snippets of information, distracted by controversies, and kept in a constant state of emotional urgency. Meanwhile, truly transformative knowledge remains out of reach for most. Spiritual knowledge has also been distorted. Major religious traditions have been wielded as tools for mental and behavioral control. The concept of sin was introduced to instill guilt. The notions of heaven and hell were employed to evoke fear. Blind obedience was promoted as a virtue. Sacred texts were reinterpreted, mutilated, and reshaped to serve the needs of those in power. Direct contact with the divine was prohibited. Priests, gurus, pastors, and spiritual authorities took on the role of mandatory intermediaries. The sacred became bureaucratized, and the mystical knowledge that could liberate individuals was shrouded in layers of dogma and official interpretations. The human spirit was tamed by the fear of making mistakes, of doubting, of questioning. Even within the realm of science, the boundaries of knowledge have been set by rigid paradigms. For centuries, classical physics overlooked the philosophical implications of its discoveries. Medicine reduced the human body to a mere collection of organs, neglecting the individual as a whole. Psychology divided the mind and spirit, turning existential suffering into clinical disorders. Any scientist daring to propose a more holistic perspective was discredited, ridiculed, and excluded from academic journals. Scientific authority became a new clergy, complete with its rituals, dogmas, and heresies. Knowledge was confined to glass castles, while genuine seekers were pushed to the fringes of the system. However, this control system cannot stand without the unconscious collaboration of society itself. From a young age, we are taught to value diplomas, titles, and institutional recognition. We measure knowledge by the number of certificates we hold, rather than the depth of our experiences. We overlook the wise who lack academic credentials, dismiss the teachers who speak with simplicity, and question anything not published by prestigious publishers. This mindset perpetuates the cycle of exclusion from true knowledge. We become complicit in the domestication of our minds. Meanwhile, the deepest truths remain hidden, not due to a lack of access, but because of our unwillingness to break free from the comfort of cultivated ignorance. The true revolution begins when an individual takes on the role of a sovereign seeker. It happens when one realizes that knowledge isn't confined to institutions, but is found in direct experiences with life, in the quiet moments of reflection, in observing nature, in deep intuition, and in the symbolic reading of the world. When one understands that the most valuable knowledge is that which transforms, expands consciousness, and awakens an awareness of the interconnectedness of all things, this kind of knowledge cannot be bought, imposed, or measured through tests. It is experiential, organic, and spiritual. It starts the moment one breaks free from dependence on external authority and reconnects with the inner source of wisdom. Knowledge as a tool of control has been one of the most effective means of domination in human history. It has trapped generations in narrow paradigms, limited their perception of reality, and blocked access to the full potential of consciousness. But that cycle is unraveling. Every day, more individuals are awakening to the need for reconnection with holistic knowledge. Living libraries are being rebuilt. Ancestral paths are being revisited. The sacred is returning to the heart of our quest, and with it comes the possibility of a new paradigm where knowledge no longer divides but unites, where it serves not power but truth, where it does not feed fear but ignites freedom. We live in an era of instant connection, where billions of data points are generated every second, racing through global networks at an unimaginable speed. It's the age of touchscreen interactions, immediate access, and the feeling that all the world's knowledge is just a few clicks away. Yet beneath this facade of cognitive freedom lies a new form of confinement. An invisible wall, built not with bricks, but with algorithms, filters, information bubbles, and calculated distractions. The illusion of complete information has become the new veil that obscures the truth. The overload of data hasn't brought clarity. It has led to confusion. The abundance of sources hasn't broadened our awareness. It has further fragmented our perception. What once seemed like a gateway to liberation has subtly transformed into a prison that masquerades as paradise. In the past, ignorance was imposed by scarcity. Books were burned, knowledge was hidden, and languages went extinct. Today, ignorance is manufactured by excess. The system has realized that to prevent awakening, it no longer needs to conceal the truth. Diluting it will suffice. Minds are flooded with stimuli, opinions, headlines, visual distractions, artificial sounds, polarized debates, and shallow discussions. Instead of silencing the seeker, they are now buried under mountains of pseudo-knowledge. Information has become noise, and within that noise, wisdom is lost. Contemplation has been replaced by haste. Depth has given way to speed. Inner silence has been overtaken by a compulsion for notifications. A culture has emerged where knowing equates to consuming rather than understanding. Social media has become the epicenter of this new architecture of control. What began as a promise of global connection has quickly morphed into a vast landscape of psychological manipulation. Every like, comment, share, and view time is meticulously tracked. Algorithms dictate what you see, what you think you've chosen, and what you believe you've sought out on your own. Filter bubbles create parallel realities where individuals are exposed only to ideas that reinforce their pre-existing beliefs, shutting out any dissenting viewpoints. Critical thinking atrophies. The ability to engage in dialogue fades away, and truth, which has always required contrast and the clash of ideas, vanishes into the artificial homogeneity of our timelines. The digitization of information has also led to the industrialization of falsehoods. It has never been easier to spread misinformation, manipulate narratives, and create fake authorities. Influencers with millions of followers peddle magical solutions with no real foundation. Questionable websites churn out alternative facts to fuel radical ideologies. Artificial intelligence tools generate text, images, and videos that look convincingly real. The line between what is genuine and what is fabricated has become blurred. Meanwhile, the collective mind, already weakened by fragmented knowledge, falls prey to cognitive traps. Instead of seeking wisdom, most people look for validation. Rather than striving for growth, they aim to win arguments. Instead of seeking understanding, they chase virality. But it's not just information that's controlled, it's also the individual's time. The design of digital platforms is crafted to capture attention, hold the gaze, and hook the brain. Infinite scrolling wasn't created by chance. It's a neurochemical trap. Each notification activates the dopamine system, and every reaction delivers microdoses of pleasure that keep users hooked. The mind no longer has spaces for rest. Free time has been colonized. Breaks have turned into opportunities to consume more content. Even silence has been filled with artificial sounds. This hyperconnectivity leads to a profound disconnection from the body, nature, genuine relationships, and the soul. Paradoxically, the overload of information creates emptiness. In this context, the spiritual quest has also been impacted. There has been a surge in profiles discussing expansion of consciousness, but they often recycle shallow formulas, cliches, and sanitized spirituality. An industry of light has emerged, where the sacred has become a marketing tool. Ancestral practices have been stripped of their meaning and turned into mere trends. Authentic masters have been replaced by influencers. The path to truth, which has always been challenging, is now marketed as easy. Spiritual awakening, which requires deconstruction, silence, and inner confrontation, has been reduced to the consumption of quick, superficial content. The sacred has been packaged to fit into the format of social media stories. As a result, seekers, instead of diving deep, remain on the surface, convinced they are evolving. The digital age has given rise to a new form of censorship, algorithmic censorship. There's no longer a need to ban books, imprison authors, or shut down schools. Now it's enough to program platforms to suppress certain content, limit the reach of specific posts, and favor narratives that align with particular agendas. Digital invisibility has become the new method of silencing. Content that challenges dominant paradigms is labeled as misinformation, even when it presents solid arguments. Dissenting voices are demonetized, excluded, and discredited. The illusion of free speech persists because people can still speak, yet no one sees or hears them. It's a new inquisition, now carried out by machines operating under unseen interests. Even search engines, once a symbol of intellectual freedom, have been ensnared by this logic. What appears on the first pages isn't necessarily the most accurate. It's simply the most profitable. Keywords, SEO strategies, and ad investments all dictate what can be found. Deep knowledge, lacking immediate profit potential, gets pushed to the fringes of the web. The searcher, believing they've done their research, only accesses what has been predetermined for them to find. The internet's infinite library is, in reality, a limited shelf. meticulously arranged to uphold the prevailing model of thought and consumption. Free information, unfiltered, does exist, but it's buried beneath layers of irrelevance, noise, and distraction. The impact on our collective consciousness is profound. New generations are born immersed in screens, learning more from algorithms than from human teachers. Memory has been outsourced to search engines. Intuition is drowned out by an overload of stimuli. Imagination has been tamed by ready-made visual narratives. The soul's need for slowness has been trampled by the urgency of a click. Our inner lives have become a desert, and the spirit, suffocated by so much content, loses the ability to hear itself. We've never been so informed, and yet so disconnected, so accessible, and yet so absent, surrounded by stimuli, and yet so empty of meaning. Amidst this information chaos, there are those who begin to see through the facade. They are the ones who uninstall apps, slow down and silence notifications. They return to contemplation, write by hand, and listen with their hearts. They understand that knowledge isn't found on screens, but in the deep listening of the body, nature, symbols, and dreams. They rediscover the joy of slow reading, face-to-face conversations, and solitude without loneliness. These are the new rebels, those who dare to disconnect in order to reconnect. They don't reject technology. Instead, they use it mindfully as a tool rather than a prison. They seek not just information, but wisdom. Waking up in the digital age takes courage. It requires letting go, discernment, and a constant effort to sift through the gold and the illusion. It calls for the understanding that the mind isn't a box to be filled, but a lens to be clarified. True knowledge can't be bought, liked, or made viral. It must be experienced. And despite all the distractions engineered around us, the human soul can still find the thread of truth. Even amidst the noise, even in the darkness, because the spark of what's real never fades. It simply hides, waiting for someone to turn off the artificial light so they can finally see. Over the millennia, knowledge has been fragmented, divided into isolated sectors that rarely communicate with one another. This process, driven by religious systems, academic structures, political powers, and more recently, digital mechanisms, has created the illusion that reality can be understood in parts, as if existence were a disassemblable machine where each component could be studied independently without considering the whole. However, this paradigm is reaching its limits. The boundaries of fragmentation have become apparent. The emptiness of meaning, the widespread existential crisis, the collapse of mental health systems, the saturation of information. These all point to the failure of a model that has separated what has always been one. And so, quietly, a new movement is beginning to emerge: the reintegration of knowledge. This reintegration is not just an intellectual desire, it's a spiritual necessity. Increasingly, scientists, philosophers, therapists, spiritualists, educators, and seekers alike are recognizing that a compartmentalized view of the world is not only limited, but also harmful. The body suffers when the mind is neglected. The mind collapses when the spirit is denied. Society becomes unbalanced when nature is separated from culture. Everything is interconnected, and this interconnection, long overlooked, is now re-emerging with vigor, not as a theory, but as an undeniable experience. There's a growing awareness that the universe is a living web, where everything influences everything else, and where there are no real boundaries between science and spirituality, matter and energy, or the visible and the invisible. One of the fields where this reintegration is most apparent is contemporary science, particularly in quantum physics. The classical paradigms that once supported a mechanistic view of reality are being challenged by discoveries that reveal an interdependent and non-local nature of the universe. Phenomena like quantum entanglement demonstrate that particles separated by vast distances can still influence each other instantaneously. This disrupts Cartesian logic and paves the way for deeper understandings of reality. Scientists like David Bohm have proposed models that resonate with ancient worldviews, such as the idea of an implicate order, where everything is potentially connected to everything else. Physics, which once dismissed the invisible, is now beginning to engage with it. In the field of medicine, there is a growing movement towards a more integrative approach. Conventional medicine, which focuses solely on biochemistry and physical symptoms, is no longer sufficient to address the complexities of modern health challenges. The exponential rise in chronic, autoimmune, and psychosomatic diseases highlights the need for approaches that view humans as integrated systems. Integrative medicine, which combines conventional practices with traditional knowledge, energy therapies, mind-body approaches, and contemplative practices, is gaining traction. Techniques such as acupuncture, Reiki, meditation, herbal medicine, and transpersonal psychotherapy, once marginalized, are now being recognized for their effectiveness and depth. The body is finally being seen as a reflection of consciousness. Education is beginning to embrace a new perspective. Alternative schools, such as those founded on the principles of Rudolf Steiner, Maria Montessori, or Krishnamurti, advocate for a learning process that honors each individual's internal rhythm, integrating art, science, spirituality, and practical life skills. Rather than producing mere imitators, these approaches aim to awaken vibrant, creative, and intuitive intelligence. Knowledge shifts from being something imposed from the outside to being revealed from within, emerging naturally from curiosity and presence. This holistic pedagogy is planting seeds that will soon radically transform the concept of learning. Children are no longer seen as empty vessels to be filled, but as sacred beings in the process of blossoming. Psychology, in turn, began to break away from materialistic reductionism by acknowledging that the human psyche extends beyond just the brain. Transpersonal psychology, for instance, introduced the idea that humans possess dimensions that transcend the ego and that spiritual experiences are not pathologies but essential parts of the journey towards self-discovery. Altered states of consciousness, once dismissed as delusions, are now being seriously explored by researchers who recognize that they hold valuable insights into the mysteries of the mind. Practices such as the therapeutic use of sacred plants like ayahuasca, the conscious application of holotropic breathing, and the study of near-death experiences all reveal an uncharted territory that awaits integration and respect. Indigenous peoples, once marginalized, are now being rediscovered as guardians of essential knowledge. Their worldviews don't fragment reality, they weave it together. For them, the spirit of the forest isn't just a metaphor, it's a living truth. The earth isn't merely a resource, it's a nurturing mother. Dreams aren't mere fantasies, they carry profound messages. Time isn't linear, it's cyclical. Healing isn't just about the body, it encompasses the soul, relationships, and community. This wisdom, long overlooked, is now sought after by scientists, therapists, and conscious leaders. An alliance is forming between the ancient and the modern, between tradition and innovation, between the sacred and the scientific. This partnership holds the potential to heal not just individuals, but the entire planet. Spiritual traditions, when stripped of institutional dogmas, provide invaluable insights for the reintegration of knowledge. Taoism teaches us about the balance between opposing forces. Hinduism introduces us to subtle bodies and energy centers. Sufism guides us along the path of the heart. Buddhism uncovers the workings of the mind, and Kabbalah reveals the layers of creation. When viewed without the lens of fanaticism, all these traditions unveil a profound understanding of the nature of reality, existence, and the cosmos. What's most remarkable is how they converge, despite originating in different contexts. This convergence is the hallmark of truth, when various paths lead to the same center. Art also emerges as a bridge between worlds. Music, painting, poetry, cinema, theater, all of these mediums possess the power to convey the unspeakable, to unite reason and emotion, and to express visions that elude rational language. Art is the language of the soul. It reaches into the invisible. For this reason, it is a crucial ally in reconstructing knowledge that not only informs, but transforms. Works that blend science, spirituality, and aesthetics are beginning to emerge. Films that explore consciousness, paintings that capture inner visions, music that elevates our vibrational state. Art is the realm where the divide between subject and object, knowing and feeling, theory and experience begins to crumble. In this context, contemporary humans face a profound choice: to continue consuming fragmented information, remaining on the surface of a mechanical and anxious existence, or to dive deep towards a lost unity, rebuilding within themselves the bridge between all the scattered pieces. This reconstruction requires effort, yes, but it also brings relief, because at last, one can breathe outside the box. Finally, one can see with clear eyes. Finally, one can walk with genuine purpose. Reintegrating knowledge is more than just a philosophical endeavor. It's a collective healing, a necessity for the planet's soul. This movement of reintegration is not just a passing trend. It heralds the dawn of a new era, one where knowledge returns to being a service rather than a tool for power. An era in which learning is a sacred act and teaching is an expression of love. In this new age, knowledge flows from the intellect to the heart, from the individual to the collective, and shifts from competition to cooperation. It's a time when science, philosophy, spirituality, and art gather around the same table, where there is no hierarchy among different forms of knowledge, but rather a harmonious dance of complementarity. And finally, humanity begins to remember that it is itself the temple, the book, the experiment, and the song. At the heart of this journey toward the fragmentation and reconnection of knowledge lies a central silent figure, the seeker. Amidst the chaos, the overload of information, and the orchestration of forgetfulness, there is someone who feels an inner call that cannot be ignored. This call doesn't come from the mind, the screens, or the manuals, but from a gentle, profound voice that resides in the center of the chest, the voice of the soul. This call is not rational. It cannot be explained, only recognized. It manifests as a discomfort with superficiality, a dissatisfaction with easy answers, an insatiable thirst for meaning, for truth, for unity. It is this restlessness that transforms an ordinary person into an alchemist, a transformer of oneself, a restorer of lost wholeness. The modern seeker is the heir to a forgotten lineage. Deep within, they carry the memories of ancient initiates, masters, curators, and philosophers who have walked this path before. Even if they aren't fully aware of it, their journey is cyclical and spiraled, filled with symbols and challenges that echo ancestral rites of passage. Like every alchemist, they instinctively grasp that true transformation occurs not externally, but within. It's not about accumulating information. It's about the transmutation of one's very being. The lead of ignorance, pain, separation, and doubt must be melted away in the fire of consciousness, allowing the gold of wisdom, clarity, and wholeness to emerge. Alchemy is not just a metaphor, it's a real process of the soul learning to piece itself back together. As the seeker walks toward wholeness, they confront their own shattered pieces, old traumas, inherited conditioning, limiting beliefs, repressed emotions, and ignored shadows. All that was set aside to survive in a fragmented world comes rushing back, not as punishment, but as an invitation. Each internal fragment re-emerges as an opportunity for healing. True wisdom begins when the seeker stops running away and starts to listen. They listen to the anger, the sadness, the loneliness, the fear, and come to understand that even the heaviest emotions carry forgotten messages. The seeker realizes that they cannot heal the world without first healing themselves. The unity of external knowledge begins with the reintegration of the self, and every lost piece of humanity is reflected within them. This journey is neither linear nor comfortable. It demands courage, the courage to confront one's own history, to question everything that has been taught as truth, to break away from what feels safe, and to symbolically die in order to be reborn. Alchemical death is essential, the death of the inflated ego, the artificial identity, the attachment to control. The seeker learns to surrender to the unknown, to trust the invisible, and to move forward even without a map. They exchange certainty for presence, and in that presence, they begin to notice that life responds. Synchronicities occur. Teachers appear disguised as situations, people, and challenges. The universe is alive and communicates. This awareness changes everything, because they stop searching externally and start listening within. True wisdom unfolds in layers. Each new level of awareness reveals a fresh inner landscape. The seeker realizes that there isn't a final truth, but rather a living, dynamic truth that expands with their capacity to love, to surrender, and to embrace. They come to understand that knowledge isn't about having power over others, but about the power to transform oneself. Awakening isn't about becoming superior, It's about becoming more humble, more compassionate, and more human. Knowing isn't about accumulating answers. It's about living the questions with integrity. Wholeness isn't a destination. It's a state of continuous presence, where every action, every choice, and every silence carries awareness. And it is this awareness that brings healing. On the path of inner alchemy, the seeker rediscovers forgotten practices. He meditates not as a technique, but as a deep dive. He breathes mindfully, walks in silence, observes nature, interprets symbols, and listens to dreams. He studies, yes, but with discernment. He learns to distinguish between knowledge that liberates and knowledge that confines. He rediscovers the body as a temple, the mind as a tool, and the heart as a compass. He values time as a sacred space. He begins to choose what he consumes, not just with his mouth, but with his eyes, ears, and soul. He understands that everything that enters him shapes who he becomes. The seeker, as an alchemist, is also a gardener of the self. He plants, waters, prunes, and waits, and he reaps internal fruits that no external achievement can replace. Throughout this journey, he learns about cycles. There are times of expansion and contraction, light and shadow, climax and silence. Growth isn't a straight line, it's a spiral of learning. Pain has its place, just as doubt does. Even stumbles are part of the dance of awakening. He begins to honor these cycles instead of resisting them. He learns to observe himself without judgment, to embrace himself with tenderness, and to recognize the sacred even in moments of falling, because the alchemist understands that even ashes hold secrets, and that beauty isn't found in perfection, but in wholeness, a wholeness that encompasses everything, including what has been rejected. The seeker begins to free themselves from the need for external validation. They understand that not everyone will grasp their journey, that many are still caught in the old paradigm, and that some may label them as naive, eccentric, or even dangerous. But they remain untroubled. They know their strength comes from within, that their compass is internal, and that their connection to the truth is direct. They don't need to convert anyone, just to live with integrity. In doing so, they become a mirror. Their quiet presence starts to inspire. Their way of living, speaking, and choosing begins to radiate transformation. They become an agent of change, not through imposition, but through emanation. As he progresses, he begins to connect with other seekers. He realizes he is not alone. A quiet network of awakened souls is forming across the globe. People from different cultures, languages, and paths are experiencing the same process of reintegration. Genuine spaces for sharing, deep listening, and conscious celebration begin to emerge. Projects that integrate knowledge arise. Communities that live in a more connected way flourish. Technologies aligned with the ethics of the heart develop, and movements that restore the sacredness of life take shape. The alchemist becomes a co-creator and understands that his personal healing is part of the collective healing. In the end, the seeker, like an alchemist, realizes that their journey isn't about accumulating power, but about dissolving the barriers that kept them from the truth. They don't need to become something new. They just need to remember who they've always been. This remembering happens step by step, breath by breath, choice by choice. Each conscious gesture rebuilds a connection with the whole. Every moment lived in presence is a silent prayer. Each act of love is a transformation. They stop searching for light as something distant and begin to recognize that it pulses within every cell, every atom, and with every heartbeat. And in doing so, they finally understand the knowledge was never lost. It was merely asleep. The path to wholeness is, above all, a journey of awakening. There comes a moment in the journey when the previously scattered pieces begin to align. What once felt like disjointed noise, fragmented memories, vague intuitions, distant stories, or echoes of forgotten truths now comes together with crystal clear clarity within the awakened self. It's not a sudden revelation, like a flash of light illuminating everything at once, but rather a series of subtle, profound connections that quietly organize the inner landscape. The vision of the whole starts to emerge. The order of truth appears, not as an external structure or established dogma, but as a living field of universal coherence that becomes visible to the soul's eye. A truth that doesn't impose itself, but reveals itself. one that doesn't need defending because its light dissolves all doubt with its presence. This order is neither hierarchical nor authoritarian, nor is it centralized. It is organic, fluid, and vibrational. It resonates at every level of existence, from atoms to galaxies, from the cells of the body to planetary systems. It does not separate science from spirituality, reason from intuition, or humanity from nature. On the contrary, it reveals that all these polarities are expressions of the same underlying intelligence. It is the web that connects all forms of life, all ancestral knowledge, all symbolic languages, and all fundamental myths, not as abstract concepts, but as direct experiences. When this awareness takes hold, the seeker realizes that everything that once seemed separate has always been united, that reality does not divide, and that fragmentation was merely a blurred lens, not the essence of existence. At this stage, the worldview undergoes a radical transformation. Nature ceases to be merely a backdrop and becomes a sacred temple. Each tree is a teacher, every stone a record, and each animal a reflection. The human body is seen as a microcosm of the universe, where everything is encoded: lunar cycles, Earth's elements, and the laws of the heavens. Linear time dissolves, giving way to a sacred time where past and future bend into the eternal now. History shifts from being a series of random events to a dance of descent and ascent, forgetfulness and remembrance, separation and return. Every civilization that has risen, every library that has burned, every voice that has been silenced, all of these are part of a grand cycle of learning in human consciousness. The order of truth also manifests as internal coherence. The awakened individual feels that their life transforms from a collection of separate parts into a unified expression. Thoughts, feelings, actions, and words begin to align. Choices become more intentional. The body responds with vitality. The mind clears. Emotions flow freely. Relationships become more refined. There's no longer a need for masks. What is experienced externally reflects what is nurtured internally. This integrity is the result of a long alchemical process, one of purification, listening, and humility. Once it stabilizes, it creates a magnetic field that attracts synchronicities, meaningful connections, and unexpected opportunities. Life, at last, begins to align with the soul's purpose. This order also reveals the ability to navigate between different paradigms without conflict. The seeker no longer has to choose between science and mysticism, tradition and innovation, action and contemplation. They understand that each approach holds a piece of the whole, and that wisdom lies in harmonizing them rather than opposing them. They can study quantum physics and the I Ching with equal reverence. They can listen to a Zen master and read a scientific treatise with the same level of attention. They can dance to the beat of a shamanic drum and ponder classical philosophy on the same day, because they no longer seek identity in a flag, but coherence with the flow of life. Truth becomes a field of resonance, not an ideological belonging. The order of truth is also recognized in the expanding compassion it fosters. The awakened seeker no longer feels separate from others. They see a spark of the same origin in every being. Even in the face of ignorance, conflict, and collective pain, they respond not with judgment, but with loving presence. They understand that every being is at some point on the spiral of awakening, that everyone, without exception, is finding their way back home. They recognize that suffering arises from disconnection, the illusion of separation, and the forgetfulness of one's own light. There's no need to convince anyone. Their role is to be a bridge. They hold a frequency. They live in such alignment that their presence brings healing, even without words. At this point in the journey, time is no longer a straight line, but a living organism. Past experiences no longer confine us, and future projections cease to disturb us. Everything unfolds in the here and now. In this present moment, the awakened being reconnects with a greater purpose: to serve the expansion of consciousness. Not as an ego-driven mission, but as a natural expression of wholeness. They become an instrument of the whole. Their life transforms into a silent song, a gift. And this gift doesn't require a stage, fame, or followers. It blossoms in simplicity, in caring for the body, in attentive listening, in speaking truthfully, in taking just actions, and in nurturing silence, because each conscious gesture helps to restore the lost order. The awareness of the order of truth also brings discernment. An awakened being no longer gets swept away by fear-driven narratives, shallow dualisms, or quick-fix solutions. They understand that the world is still grappling with the aftermath of fragmentation, and as a result, they don't rush, don't judge, and don't get overly excited. They remain centered, observing with clarity and acting with precision. They choose their battles wisely and recognize that often the best response is to refrain from reacting. Spiritual maturity isn't measured by the number of books one has read, but by the quality of one's presence. It's reflected in the calmness amidst chaos, the ability to embrace paradox, and the willingness to surrender to mystery without losing clarity. This new order won't be established through decrees or built on ideologies. It emerges from the unseen, like a seed planted in the hearts of those who dare to remember. As more and more individuals awaken to this organic, silent, and radiant truth, it begins to spread throughout the web of life. Schools transform, families evolve, cities change. Consumption decreases, art rises, politics is purified, science becomes more human, spirituality breaks free from temples and returns to everyday life. This isn't utopia, it's the inevitable outcome of a new state of collective consciousness that arises from reconnecting with wholeness. At this stage of the journey, the seeker realizes that the greatest service they can offer to the world is to remain whole, to be a reflection of unity, to be a living memory of who we were before the fall and who we can become after reintegration. They understand that every step taken toward their personal truth resonates within the collective field, that every shadow they heal within themselves illuminates the shadows of the world, that every piece they integrate within themselves reconstructs the image of the whole. And so, without fanfare, they become an anchor point for the new order, a silent pillar between heaven and earth. The order of truth is not a theory or a movement, it's a frequency, a vibrational quality that one taps into when aligned with their essence, the planet, and cosmic cycles. It represents the return of the sacred feminine to consciousness, the unification of the left and right hemispheres of the brain, and the merging of logic with love, science with spirit. It signifies humanity's maturity after a long period of cosmic childhood. When this truth fully manifests, there's no longer a need for control, hierarchy, or fear. Because when truth is lived, it becomes a natural order, fluid, serene, powerful, and loving. The crossing is underway, the bridge has been started, the ancient texts are being rewritten in new forms. The temple is once again present in the now, the library returns to the heart, and the truth, once shattered into 1,000 pieces, becomes a complete mirror where the seeker can finally recognize their own reflection and remember that they have always been a part of the whole. Mind Unfettered, the stage is yours now. If this journey resonated with your soul, share your thoughts in the comments. In which part of your life do you feel that knowledge has been the most fragmented? And more importantly, what step do you believe you need to take today to start piecing together your truth? Let's come together to manifest this reconnection. Every comment is a spark that helps rebuild the field of collective consciousness. Your voice matters. If you felt something awaken within you today, the next step is already before your eyes. Click now to watch the next video, The Book of 33 Steps, the hidden map Jesus left for enlightenment, and uncover the secret map left by the one who never spoke in fragments, but always in kingdom. See you there, seeker of truth.